Welcome and thank you for tuning in. 51 years ago, the Americans, well, not all of them, but two of their astronauts landed on the moon. One of the few times that they've actually beaten the Soviet Union in the space race. And 76 years ago, Stauffenberg tried to assassinate Adolf Hitler, unfortunately failing. But we, of course, want to focus on considerably more recent events, specifically the Polish presidential elections. First things first, Andrzej Duda has won these elections. He has beaten Rafał Trzaskowski 51.03% to 48.97%. Voter turnout was spectacularly high, with over 68% of all Polish citizens participating, the highest ever after 1995. And both of the candidates have received over 10 million votes. This has never happened before. Andrzej Duda got roughly 10,440,000, whereas Rafał Trzaskowski got roughly 10,018,000 votes. Now, this of course was a very important victory for the political agenda and for the political supporters of the United Right and the Peace Party, the party of Jarosław Kaczyński. However, Andrzej Duda didn't really have time to celebrate this victory, because the very next day he got pranked by two Russian YouTubers. The link to their prank will be published in the comments below. So far, over 2.5 million viewers have watched the prank. And these are pretty well-known pranksters. In the past, they've also pranked Elton John, they've pranked members of the royal family of Great Britain. So it's in a sense it's a bit of a noble list to be on, but at the same time it was of course very disgraceful to see our president believing that he's actually talking to Antonio Guterres, who is the head of the United Nations. And yeah, those two YouTubers, Vladimir Kuznetsov and Alexei Stolyarov, have managed to trick Duda into believing that he's actually talking to the chief of the United Nations. Now, how did it happen? Apparently, they contacted our United Nations office in New York, our United Nations representation there, and the email address seemed to be one that the secretary would usually communicate it from. So there are no doubts about the validity and credibility of this request. It has been checked with two Polish officials that were working in the New York office of our representation of our United Nations embassy, and both of them confirmed that this was a legitimate request. After that, the call was arranged, and it was all recorded. It's roughly a 12-minute call. They cover a wide range of topics, like, for instance, how Poland is dealing with the coronavirus. Andrzej Duda is pretty proud of how we are dealing with it. He emphasizes that we had only 38,000 cases, which, given a population of 38 million, is a rather low number. At the same time, he conveniently forgets or ignores that we have one of the lowest numbers of tests carried out per 1,000 inhabitants. So of course, if we test very few people, we get very few confirmed cases. Right? That's there's no rocket science behind it. Then they're also talking about even Zhubrówka, because the YouTubers mentioned that they have once received this gift from Donald Tusk. They also mentioned that Donald Tusk was concerned about potential LGBT discrimination and about our relations with the European Union and Germany. Now, Andrzej Duda ignores the statement on Germany and the European Union. However, he comments on LGBT, saying that yes, there was a strong discussion during the campaign about adoption and about same-sex or same-gender marriages. We need to note here that there was not really a big discussion around it. Those topics were not the center of the political exchange and agenda in Poland, as none of the presidential candidates in the second round was proposing to change anything in this respect. But it was one of the topics that the Peace Party tried to put forward to encourage their hardcore supporters to go and vote. So they were creating like a false promise or a false fear that if Rafał Trzaskowski would win, we would get adoption rights for same-gender marriage, for same-gender couples. We would get same-gender marriages, and both aspects, both demands are very unpopular among the supporters of the Peace Party. So, in the absence of more realistic and more important areas and topics to talk about, Andrzej Duda tried to engage with his supporters, tried to mobilize his supporters by returning to this topic. Right? So him saying that there was a strong debate around it, or this was an important topic during the campaign, that's not really the truth. It was a topic that was artificially put forward by Andrzej Duda and his campaign. They're also talking about the Ukraine and whether Poland would be interested to take back some of the western territories of the Ukraine, which, as some of you might remember, used to be Polish before the Second World War. And actually, I don't want to spoil the entire recording. That's why I linked to it. Feel free to listen to it. You will also get a very good indication of how fluent our president is in English. I would dare to conclude that while he's not particularly sharp in his Polish statements either, the necessity to express oneself in English is degrading the quality of his answers and of his contributions even more. So that's definitely not playing in his favor. In one of the last sentences, the YouTubers recommend to him that hopefully he will not have to spend the night without Zhubrówka. And I'm not sure if I should share this hope with regards to you, but hopefully we'll have also other means of entertaining ourselves beyond alcohol, as that's certainly not a prejudice or not a generalized statement that I would necessarily want to be associated with the Polish nation. We certainly know how to entertain ourselves and how to party without too much strong alcohol. Now, back to politics. What did Rafał Trzaskowski, the loser, do? Well, first of all, him and his political supporters, namely very high-profile commentators, journalists, but also representatives of the civic platform, first of all tried to sell it as a victory. Right? So the civic platform lost their 6th election in a row. right? So they were losing local elections, they were losing elections to the Polish government, to the Polish parliament, to the European Parliament, now to the president. It's really like 6 elections in a row were lost to the Law and Justice Party. And still they're trying to sell this as a victory. That's pretty questionable, if you ask me at least. Moreover, many of the commentators try to find scapegoats for this loss. Right? After they admitted that actually losing an election is something bad, it's not a victory, they started hunting or searching for someone else to blame. And of course they found someone. The primary victim of their accusations was Szymon Hołownia. Specifically, the roughly 300,000 people who voted for Hołownia in the first round and for Andrzej Duda in the second round. And this is actually a topic we should consider more carefully, because it's true. Roughly 9 to 10% of the people who voted for Hołownia in the first round originally were Andrzej Duda supporters. And, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who understands politics, those people, when they were faced with a choice between Rafał Trzaskowski in the second round and Duda, they went back to Duda, obviously, right? Why would they vote for Rafał Trzaskowski if they were leaning towards Andrzej Duda even before the first round? That's natural, right? They would have voted for Szymon Hołownia, but since Szymon Hołownia had to leave the race, they only had Andrzej Duda left, which was someone who they wouldn't prefer compared to Hołownia, but someone who they certainly prefer when contrasted against Rafał Trzaskowski. So those 300,000 people went back to the origin, so to speak, and voted for Andrzej Duda. Is this a surprise? Not at all, right? If I was one of them, I would have done the same. Some of the more renowned Polish commentators seem to be baffled or surprised or even shocked by that. And of course they're accusing those 300,000 people of actually causing the change in the election results. What all of this shows us again is, first of all, the civic platform is not capable of learning from their mistakes. They're just repeating them over and over again. They're also not capable of admitting any mistakes. And obviously, you need to admit your mistakes in order to be able to learn from them and to avoid them the next time. And lastly, this also emphasizes what all polls have been showing before, that the only candidate who was able to win against Andrzej Duda was Szymon Hołownia. So, if Szymon Hołownia had reached second place in the first round, he would have won the second election, the second round, right? Unfortunately, he lost by, I calculated that, 1,611,972 voters, right? That's 1,611,972. If this amount of people would have switched their mind, changed their mind, and gone from Rafał Trzaskowski to Szymon Hołownia, Szymon Hołownia would be second in the first round of the elections and would have won the second round of the elections. Specifically because he was able to attract support, electoral support, from both sides of this huge divide that's tearing apart Poland, right? Both from the side that's called pro-democratic and from the side that's more leaning towards supporting the current government. Now, what did Rafał Trzaskowski do? He announced the creation of a new movement. Right now, it's supposedly called New Solidarity, Nowa Solidarność. In itself, the name is a nice tweak because the civic platform is generally perceived as being the party of the people who are richer, the party of the people who are more selfish, the party of the people who are more individualistic. And so calling something new solidarity is creating this image of taking care for each other, of trying to help each other, of solidarity, of support, of empathy, which is completely different from what Platforma Obywatelska or the civic platform has been perceived and associated with in the past. Now, what's the issue with that? The people behind this movement are exactly the same who are also running the civic platform. So how on earth are you going to create a movement that people will trust and believe in if you're having the same people running it, right? People will simply not buy into these politicians suddenly changing their mind by 180 degrees and pretending to be empathetic, and supportive. One of the key statements that the civic platform was remembered for was a statement by Komorowski, our previous president, who said to a young individual asking him, what to do next, how to better go about living your life, get a better job and take a loan. This was one of the key messages from the civic platform in terms of supporting the community. Rafał Trzaskowski wasn't very clear on what the goal of this new political movement is and how it relates to the civic platform, because it's not meant to replace it. It seems to be an entity that's meant to allow people to work for the civic platform without doing so officially. And one of the main goals that was already announced is collecting support for bills initiated by the people that are meant to go to parliament. In Poland, if you want to propose a bill, you need to collect 100,000 signatures for the bill to be processed by the parliament. So, in a sense, it's a very sad move, right? You're creating a social entity, a movement that's meant to divert people away from the true image of the party that's running the movement. And the main goal for the movement is to do the hard and difficult and tedious work of collecting bills that most likely will be proposed by the civic platform. So the civic platform has become too lazy to collect those signatures, to collect the support, and instead they will use the enthusiasm and support and dedication of members of this movement. I am not necessarily convinced that this is a sincere strategy, and I'm pretty sure that this strategy will backfire, because people are very smart when it comes to discovering whether something is fake or not, whether someone wants honest change, whether someone is driven by the right emotions, by the right goals, by the right intents. And this is in stark contrast to Szymon Hołownia's movement, who was always open about his beliefs, was very vocal about his points of view, was very inclusive when it comes to writing the program that Rafał Trzaskowski later took and copied from heavily. And his transition into a social movement, into a political movement, is very natural, right? Because he really convinced millions of Polish citizens to vote for him, tens of thousands of Polish citizens to support him in their free time by being volunteers when the campaign was being run. And now he's creating like a social entity to create an umbrella over the dedication, the convictions, the commitment, the inspiration, that people have already shown during the time of the campaign. It's a natural progression, right? Whereas Rafał Trzaskowski is trying to hold on to some of this additional support that he was able to gather beyond what the civic platform has, because there's no other strategy for the civic platform to raise voter support apart from pretending that they are someone else from the one that they really are. They need to pretend to be someone else. They need to pretend to change, or that they don't really change, in order to appeal to new voters. But it is very unlikely this strategy will work. In summary, Andrzej Duda will most likely be our next president, although there are 2,500 voter protests currently being processed by the Supreme Court, so we cannot be really sure. The Supreme Court still has roughly 2 weeks to process them until August 3rd. If the Supreme Court declares these elections to be legal, Andrzej Duda will be sworn in as the next Polish president. Rafał Trzaskowski is starting the movement. He announced he will present some more details in early September, while Szymon Hołownia has already started creating the entire framework, making sure that all of his volunteers, and hopefully many more volunteers, because every day new people call him and call our offices throughout Poland to join the movement. So he's creating all the framework, all the setup for those volunteers, for those dedication, for those engagement, for those commitments to be turned into something valuable, be it in terms of social work, in terms of being a think tank, or in the near future also in terms of political commitments. Let's hope that people will recognize who is only a marketing figure and who is a true believer in a better Poland. Thanks so much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed it. Any comments will be welcome. I'll be striving to make this broadcast better and better every single time. So with your input, this will be better.